This is Lorenzo Alexander of the Buffalo Bills, and you're listening to the Cover One Buffalo podcast.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Cover One Buffalo podcast. It's rare, but we've got it here tonight. The holy trinity of Cover One Buffalo podcast hosts. We got everybody. We got myself. We got my boy Greg Thompson and my boy Nate Geary. Greg, I'm starting with you because you're rocking the Cover One gear for all of you watching us on YouTube Live. He's got the fresh Cover One gear on. So I'm starting with you tonight. How you doing, my man?
Doing great. It's amazing. A couple of neat updates right before the show started. So a couple of fresh things to talk about. A lot of good things going on. I'm really excited to have Nate on tonight.
Nate, what's happening, dude? It's been a long time since I got to sit down and chat with you, and that's probably a good thing.
That's a good thing.
I'm glad that we're here.
A really good thing typically when we don't have to talk. But no, it's good to know that you guys needed to up your viewership by bringing on the White Stephen A.
That's right.
I appreciate
We're struggling.
I appreciate it, guys.
It's nice that you're here for us and our moments of struggle to get through this time of year. I want to get right into it with you guys here tonight, but I do want to just tell everybody, I know that I see a lot of the same names over here in the YouTube chat, so I know a lot of you guys already know, but if for anyone that is listening on the podcast or checking us out for the first time here on YouTube, welcome. We are part of the Cover One Network, cover1.net. Go check it out. All the insight and football analysts that you could handle, some of the best film breakdowns, especially for the Buffalo Bills, but we do all of the teams, all the prospects. So they had a lot of fun this draft season, but now that the draft's wrapped up, Eric is ripping through all the prospects. Nate does a lot of that stuff himself too, a lot of the writing. You won't see any writing out of Greg and I, but you'll see us here on the podcast every single week holding it down. But we have some great writers, a lot of great content coming out. So make sure you head over to cover1.net. And Nate, I know you're a big fan of the app. I don't know if you want to tell the people about that.
Yeah, it only tells me when you guys are on, because that's I like to stalk you, so I like to know where you're at. And so at all times when the app is on my phone and I've got the the notifications alert and it says Aaron and Greg are about to go live, that means I know I can raid both of your homes at that point and nothing will happen to me.
That's right, except for a
tremendous tool if you're trying to rob you both. So download the app.
You should be scared of both of our 3-year-olds, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
As we discussed before we went live. And Greg, premium membership is a big thing over at cover1.net. It kind of keeps the network going, keeps us being able to put the content out. And I know you have a favorite part of the premium membership, and a lot of the members that are here on YouTube are talking about it. Why don't you give us a shout about it and let us know?
Absolutely, yeah. The premium chat is my favorite with our Slack channel and the group that's in there. It's a fantastic group. We watch the draft together. We go through and talk every day, literally, and just kind of keep up to date on what's going on, bounce ideas off each other. Eric's in there all the time, throwing out different videos and things that he's starting to get going or asking who to work out next, who to review next, what to go through. We're throwing ideas back and forth all the time. It's where a lot of the origin of a lot of our content comes from, is ideas from the group, and we're going to go through some of those later on today, but a lot of the debates that happen in there are what really spur a lot of the discussion we see elsewhere. So a lot of the guys in there tonight, Joe and Lee and Jason, a lot of those guys are in there with us all the time each day. So we really appreciate it and have a lot of fun together, and hopefully more of you guys will come join us.
Yeah, it's a super fun time, and I got into a few arguments today on Twitter, and Nate knows, because honestly, Nate is one of the best at handling Twitter trolls. I get more worked up than he does, and Nate knows how Twitter can go. It can go downhill fast and just turn into a total fire, where I do feel like the Slack channel, we can challenge each other's ideas and beliefs in a respectful way, and everybody's friends, and at the end of the argument, you really do see the other person's point of view, and it's not a one-upmanship. So if you're looking for a place like that, the Slack channel is the place to be, and you can go head over to cover1.net and join us. Just head over to the premium section. We'll talk more about that later. Let's get right into it, Nate, because I got a lot to talk to you about. I haven't talked to you in a long time, and I've missed you, man.
Yeah.
I haven't even talked to you really on Twitter about the draft. Obviously, we have covered it a lot here. Last week, we went in depth around all the picks. I haven't had a chance to sit down and talk to you. I know you love the Ed Oliver pick. Everybody loves the Ed Oliver pick. Yeah. You can talk a little bit about that, but I kind of want your overall take on the draft, and then we'll get into some of the specifics.
So, yeah, I mean, yes, I love the Ed Oliver pick. I The UDFA class is really, I mean, the Stills pickup to me was great because they add another wide receiver. First of all, that's absolutely going to be the white training camp sensation that Brandon Riley was last year. That's what you have in David Stills this year in training camp. Not only that, but this is a guy that actually could potentially push to make a roster spot depending on what he can do special teams, right? So hey, great job. They got a premium UDFA, and that seems to be a thing that happens every year for Brandon Beane. He's figured out the undrafted market, right? So yes, that part of the draft, the end of the draft, I thought was interesting. They got a lot of high praise for some of their the Voshans of the world. Some of these guys in the later rounds, I know they were just talking about, I think, what was it? I don't know if it was The Athletic or maybe it's someone was quoting about the tight end that they got from Boston College as being a guy that, back in the 80s, he would have been a second or third round pick. I don't really know what that means, but I mean, I guess it's a positive. I don't see it as a negative. So, some of the later picks, but, a lot of people, I think will point to that third round as being maybe one that is sort of your thermometer for just how effective and how long-term Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott will be here. I think it'll come down to this third round this year. And maybe that's kind of weird to say, right? Like people are like, hey, it's third round. Who cares? Like maybe they're good players, maybe they're not. It doesn't matter. They're a third round. But what you invested in two players like that, I thought is, pretty interesting. I mean, you end up getting guys, in my opinion, in Dawson Knox that I really, really, that was probably my favorite pick. A lot of people are like, Nate, why do you like Dawson Knox? That's a weird pick to like. They traded 2 fourth-round picks for him. Well, I think he's a guy that could potentially be a starting tight end for this football team. Not only that, but be kind of a game breaker with his athletic ability of 4.5 and the 40-yard dash at his pro day at Ole Miss. A guy that was just grossly underutilized and unfortunately had some injury problems in college. And that was one of the reasons why he ended up walking out at Ole Miss is because of an injury problem that he had in high school when he was playing high school quarterback, by the way. So this is a guy that kind of has an interesting understanding of the defense and what they're throwing at him. And the most controversial pick, of course, Devin Singletary, a guy that most people were sort of scratching their heads. Why did the Bills go after Singletary? Would they have taken the running back Montgomery had Chicago not traded up the pick prior to take him? I'm not sure. I don't know that I have the answer to that. I don't know if Brandon Beane or will ever know the answer to that. But I like Devin Singletary a lot, the player that they got. Yes, he's not the testing fiend that Devin, that a DK Metcalf is. He's not putting up 30 at the bench press and running a 4.3, but what he is doing is a guy that has incredible instincts when he has the ball in his hands, can get lost behind offensive linemen, and fits really perfect into what Bobby Johnson and Brian Daboll are trying to do with this offense, and kind of having a player that can do a lot of things, but is a hard-nosed blue chip type player. He's going to be really, I think people are really going to like Devin Singletary when they see him play on the field, and especially during training camp when we all sort of fall in love with a couple players during training camp. Don't be surprised that Devin Singletary, David Sills, and a guy that I really like, Cody Ford, and of course Dawson Knox, because he's got the flow. Greg and I can understand that, having some incredible flow ourselves. So Dawson Knox coming with that flow is going to be pretty hype.
We talked about it last week, how crazy those two picks, like you said, the third round is going to kind of make or break this class. Obviously, I made the analogy that I didn't even care once you got past adding both Ed Oliver without trading up and Cody Ford in the second round.
It was a first round. Right.
Yeah, it was hard not to be a win. But then when you got into the third round, to have two guys so polar opposite, one that was amazing production with terrible testing, the other one was no production with amazing testing, and just how diametric that was in each direction.
I guess for me, the whole point that I was trying to make wasn't that this is a make or break situation, third round pick, but I think these two picks will tell us a lot about the scouting staff that they basically cleared house and brought this scouting staff in. Dan Morgan, a guy that there is very highly touted that could be talked about as a general manager here in the near future, former Panther linebacker, some guy that they brought in that they really like. It's leading their scouting staff. So him and Joe Shane, like you talk about these guys, these are defining picks for them because they moved a lot of assets to get them, but they're in premier positions this team desperately needs. And if they're both players that can make immediate or semi-immediate impacts, well, that reflects really well on them as scouts. But I think more importantly, to your point, Greg, the vast difference between them goes to show you just how difficult it is to evaluate players. A guy like Devin Singletary who can have 32 touchdowns in a season and have over 700 carries in college, and Devin Singletary What's the other Knox?
Dawson Knox.
D. I was lost. But yeah, with Dawson Knox, the thing that you look at him is total polar opposite. We're like almost no stats. I think he had 30 something career catches, right? Like something crazy like that. So, at the end of the day, they're two very different players, and I think it'll speak to their ability to scout because of how difficult it is to unearth a player with production like that was at a smaller school and lack of production at a school that's in the SEC that you'd expect. It's kind of that top end production. So it's not an indictment on them. I guess for me, it's a real litmus test for their abilities as scouting staff and as a general manager.
Yeah, I think the conversation that you guys are having about what they look for and trying to find out that, because every draft season here at Cover One, we're trying to figure out what are their archetypes, how are they discovering players, and a lot of that is on physical testing, physical stature, and then you do go to stats and you look at some of the stuff of what people produce. And really this year kind of threw a little bit of a wrench in it with that they kind of seesawed on what they're going for, and maybe there isn't a particular type target, and it's just one of those things. I think Bean alluded to it in some of his interviews of watching Singletary and just saying, hey, this guy was one of the most fun guys when I turned on the tape to watch. I'm not looking at the testing with him. It's fun, but when they're looking at Dawson Knox, there isn't enough to really watch to say, this guy's definitely going to be productive at the NFL level. You're taking some of that testing, a little bit of that tape, and then projecting what he can be. No one way that these scouts are doing it. I think that's a conversation that's constant on Twitter, projecting what these guys are going to do at the NFL level. And even in the NFL, they don't have it down to an exact science. So I want to get your take, though, because I think we all can agree and know that and expect Ed Oliver is going to come in and make an immediate impact. He's going to be a day one starter. There's nobody on this roster that's taken that from him. Mm-hmm. It would be an epic failure or catastrophe if he wasn't. There's a lot of talk about Cody Ford, where he's going to be, where he's going to end up playing. So a little bit of uncertainty there. And then the guys we talked about, obviously, with Dawson Knox and Singletary, of not really sure what that 2019 impact is going to be. I think as we get a little bit later, the chances of impact decrease a little bit. But I want to get your take. Who do you think, outside of Ed Oliver, is going to be the immediate impact rookie of this class?
That's a good question, and I think part of me wants to look at the third round, but it's so difficult to look at the third round and say, this is a guy that I can firmly get behind. Because you look at Devin Singletary, the guy with all the stats, he's got an uphill climb just by sheer number standpoint on the roster of just making the roster. Not only that, but having any meaningful impact.
Touches, right?
Right, exactly. And even if he is getting touches, it's going to be by committee, especially early on, and for his ability to stick out. Maybe that'd be listen, if Devin Singletary ends up being a player on this team, that is really great for this team for a lot of reasons, but it would have meant that he took advantage of either injury opportunities or straight out beat out a lot of good players. Yeah. So if he's all of a sudden getting a lot of carries, I think it's a huge win for the Bills, because it means he must have did something to beat out a lot of great players at the position. That's the one thing they can say is they have a lot of good to, whatever you think about LaShawn McCoy is whatever you think, but these are good to thousands of yards that he would be getting in front of. So that would be interesting, but I'm not putting my horse behind it. I think it's got to be Cody Ford, right? Like, I just think that he probably provides the most interesting, I don't want to say the most interesting pick of this draft, because it is to me a little bit interesting about where he ends up playing or where he ends up, ultimately fitting into the roster. For me, like, I think he is a right guard. That's what I think. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm right, but I see him as a starting right guard, and Chris Trapasso said, a good starting right tackle, but he thinks he could be a Pro Bowl, damn near all pro guard. And I don't know that I project him like that high, but I think right now he fits in at the right guard position, automatically makes that offensive line better. That means you have Quentin Spain at the other offensive guard, which I love. That means Mitch Morse in the middle. Holy cow, the fortification that you just created up the middle of that team, and everyone. And I think I just read an article that just came out on Cover One about Quentin Spain, about how much his fit in a Bobby Johnson type coached offensive line. And not only that, but what Brian Dable's trying to do. Like, I just think that I don't love, everyone kind of wants this idea of moving Deion Dawkins down to guard and maybe moving Spain over to the right guard. I just think that that's a lot of moving parts, where I think if you move Cody Ford down to guard, I think you're moving less parts and you're getting the most out of the move you're actually making instead of kind of moving guys around that you may feel might have the better upside. I think Deion Dawkins is a left tackle in the NFL. I think he's a pretty darn good one. And now with help next to him, I have to think Cody Ford solidifies the right side of that offensive line with Ty Nsekhe going at the right tackle. I love that idea. I think that the right side is really, really strong. And quite honestly, that offensive line from left to right with Dawkins, Spain, Morse, Cody Ford, and then having at the right tackle Ty Nsekhe, I mean, that's a top 15, top 10 unit, maybe not top 10, but that is a top half of the league unit. And all you needed last year within a lot of cases is an extra quarter of a second for Josh Allen or 1 extra inch of a hole for LaShawn McCoy. And that's the difference in football games right there. So what they've been able to do, I just love his positioning at the right guard position. We'll see if it works out that way. But to me, he's got to be one of your favorite picks of this draft, considering he was a first-round talent.
The crazy part that I like is I think there's a very reasonable possibility that long-term Cody Ford is a fixture on the line, that Devin Singletary is a key member of a running back by committee. I don't know that he's ever feature back, that Dawson Knox is our long-term starting tight end, and that it's possible none of the three of them play this year. And that just the fact that we added that much depth, that's even possible, not likely, but that's even possible is crazy. Right. That we actually have that kind of possibility with the amount of depth that came in, that there is a scenario where it's Quentin Spain and Spencer Long, and they decide that, just like your debate, that maybe Cody Ford's long-term value is at right tackle, and rather than start at guard and then move, they'd rather him mentor under Ty Nsekhe at right tackle and then get ready to take over when he's ready next year or the year after. Mm-hmm. The same idea that Devin Singletary could be really good, but what if we keep 4 running backs and that your active game day roster is Shady, Frank Gore, and TJ Yeldon, and that Devin Singletary isn't even active on game day? The same idea. Dawson Knox, Eric made the point, he's probably going to make the biggest leap from a pop gun elementary school college offense where he ran 2 routes to running a incredibly complex Earhart Perkins Dable system that is dependent on the tight end. And we signed 2 tight ends and drafted
and they were still trying to get Ben Watson.
Yeah, and apparently Lee Smith did it today because he's the cockroach that can't die. And so it's just, I think it's awesome that that's a scenario where I do hope we see more productivity than that. But there's a possibility that outside of Ed Oliver, maybe Voshon Joseph has the most on-field impact early because of special teams and rotating in.
Yeah, I think, and I was going to say that because I do think that there is a scenario where they want vets on this line. I think they made it a priority in free agency to bring in veteran leadership for Josh Allen. I think Eric and I were talking about it a little bit in a DM about kind of canceling some of the noise for Josh Allen in year 2. And that starts with veterans on the line, bringing in a guy like Mitch Morse and allowing him to control the line and the protections, and just having vets that have been in the league before, and you kind of cancel some of that noise. And Eric is going to get into it with an article he's doing about some of the stuff that they've changed with Josh Allen's stance and his drop and where he's taken his drops, and just canceling out some of that noise for him. So I do see a scenario where Ford doesn't get immediate play. And if he is, maybe it's because of injury or he just excelled and totally beat out everyone and gave them no choice. I think there's a huge scenario for Dawson Knox where we don't see him really get on the field until late in the year, sort of Matt Milano style brought along, and then his talents just took over. But I think they're totally happy with Tyler Kroft rolling into the year as the main target at tight end, and then whatever vet kind of shakes out from there. But I do think Voshon Joseph is in an interesting position because I don't think there's a lot of competition there for him. I think while Lorenzo Alexander is listed as a linebacker in a lot of scenarios, he doesn't come in and play linebacker in a lot of scenarios. Luckily for Voshon Joseph, they're not going to have 3 linebackers on the field a lot of the time, but even that small percentage of the time that they do have 3 linebackers on the field, that could be more than you're seeing Ford or Knox on the field. Say, we talked about it in the Slack channel, 15%.
Right? I mean, you could potentially see him in third down situations if he's maybe, especially if Tremaine Edmonds in smaller packages, like you could see him out on third down as a linebacker / whatever kind of player you want to.
And we're unsure where Matt Milano is heading into all these camps, and who knows where his injury is going to be. And we saw with Trent Murphy last year, we've seen it a number of times with players where they come off a major injury and they have some setbacks on the way back in. We're not really sure. And I think that Vochon Joseph does give them, I don't think that he is Matt Milano's backup or replacement, but I think he has that athleticism to plug in there if needed. So I want to talk to you about another thing, because this is something that Greg and I spent probably way too much time on. And I know for a fact that I'm going to have to mute his name on Twitter this summer, because I'm not going to be able to handle all the arguments that I'm going to try to get into.
By the way, I also have a question for you guys, but this will go after this, but it's a good question to ask you guys that I wanted to ask. So,
I don't believe that you have a good question. I only ask the good questions around here. All right. So Nate, for those of you that don't know, Nate does a series for us leading up to the draft of really analyzing the quarterbacks. And last year for us, it was a big thing, obviously, because we were in the market for a quarterback. So we were really looking at, every one of them in depth. You still did it this year, even though the Bills obviously weren't in the market for it. I thought you did a great job with the series. I agreed with you on a number of the prospects. I don't agree with you here, though. Tyree Jackson, undrafted free agent to the Buffalo Bills. It's something Greg and I talked about. I've already gotten blown up on Twitter that he's competing for QB2. There's no need to have Derek Anderson on this roster anymore. Tyree Jackson's here to save the world. And I don't believe that this is the case. You had him as your number 5 quarterback, though. Yeah. So there has to be something too that I know that you're more up on him than I am. Tell me why, and tell me where you see this guy and his career developing and what to expect in 2019.
I am, because it's one of the things that doesn't really truly make sense to me, how Josh Allen goes number 7 overall and Tyree Jackson goes undrafted, because they're both very similar players. Both have very similar defects. Both have very similar elite traits that other quarterbacks in the NFL just don't have. Tyree Jackson comes into the league with traits that 3/4 of the quarterbacks in the league don't have. He also has traits that, a lot of, CFL quarterbacks have that he doesn't have, which isn't to say that's where a lot of the things separate Josh Allen and him is, I think Josh Allen has a lot of experience in a pro-style offense and can execute and can be asked to make changes at the line of scrimmage. I don't know that, and clearly I think NFL teams want to know or don't know that Tyree Jackson can do that at the line of scrimmage. And I think that's one of the main reasons, and one of the things that I've heard is that he didn't do very great in a lot of these blackboard or whiteboard sessions when he was sitting down with teams and coaches and offensive coordinators. So, the thing that I really liked about Tyree and his ability, obviously the guy he tests out the start, 6'7" and some change, 240 pounds, 250 pounds, can run a 4.6, and is got a laser rocket arm. I think the thing that Tyree struggled with is the downs were really, really poor output on film. It was bad film. The downs cost his team football games a lot of times, right? But the ups were so many highlight reel, unbelievable 65-yard across his body on the move, absolute dimes that make you say, I mean, some of the throws he makes, you can't possibly find other examples of them. He's got that Patrick Mahomes factor that he makes throws that are difficult to find on film. And that's the kind of things that you want as a coach. You want a guy that maybe is a little raw. I mean, that's what the Bills liked in Josh Allen. It's like, hey, we've got a Brian Dable. We think we've got the nucleus as a coaching staff to develop this player. It did surprise me that he went undrafted. I really, truly expected him to go in front of guys like Jarrett Stidham. That I just thought his potential upside, his ceiling potential, to me, was just so much greater and higher than a lot of the other guys that went in front of him. Gardner Minshew was another a quarterback that I had right on the edge of the top 5, along with Jarrett Stidham, and he goes undrafted. It ends up going to the Jacksonville Jaguars, an undrafted free agent, and I really like him as a player. I think he makes throws that a lot of players don't make in terms of anticipatory throws. It doesn't mean he doesn't have a great arm. He's not half the athlete or has the arm ability that Tyree Jackson has, but he makes throws that Tyree doesn't. He makes those anticipatory throws with half the arm strength. So that's a good example for you that, a lot of these guys with superior arm strength aren't doing the finesse things that quarterbacks with less arm strength have to survive at the collegiate level and, of course, getting into the NFL. So the thing that bugs me about Tyree is that, unfortunately, I this isn't the situation. A lot of people are saying it's a good situation for Tyree, and I completely disagree. I think it's a terrible situation for Tyree because he's got veterans in front of him. He's not fighting for the quarterback 2 position. Matt Barkley is firmly there, and they paid him as such. He is one of the higher paid second-string quarterbacks in the league for good reason. I thought that going into last year when he was with the Bengals, 2 years ago now, I think it was. Yeah, it would have been 2 years ago when he got hurt. Or it was the Bears. It was one of the two. Either way, he was playing really good football, and he was starting games at the end of the year. I think it was the end of 2016 for the Bears. Then he went into training camp with the Bengals, got hurt, and then ended up not playing the entire year. The Bills picked him up midseason, and boom. But I really liked Matt Barkley, what he brings to the room. And it's pretty clear what they got Derek Anderson around for. It's not to play. It's not to coach. It's to be in the locker room as a player. So that's 3 quarterbacks. They're not keeping 4. They're going to dress 2 quarterbacks probably on game day unless there's an injury. So he's going to be on the practice squad if they can get him through waivers. The problem that I would see with Tyree is that the Bills put him on waivers to try to get him to the practice squad and someone else picks him up, which would be a huge detriment to his career because then he's going from the Bills and then switching an offense immediately a month into his NFL career. And he needs to go somewhere where he can sit and stew and be in an offense for more than 6 weeks. And I don't know that he's going to get that opportunity here.
I think that's a really fair point. I think Aaron and I both touched on the fact that we don't see any scenario that he makes the active roster, and the one that made us afraid
was Lewis has started before. Jeff Toole has started before. So there are scenarios, okay? There are scenarios.
Well, there are historic scenarios. I don't think it exists in 2019 on the Bills roster because of what you said. But yeah, history. He wouldn't be the worst quarterback who ever played for the Bills. That's a fair point. I don't want to see the scenario where he plays well enough that they're nervous about that and then try to, God forbid, they try to keep 4 active quarterbacks initially or something weird. I don't want to see that. I would love to see him on the practice squad where, God forbid, there are a handful of injuries and he needs to get called up. That happened all the time last year. Dean Marlowe was on practice squad and then got called up on a Saturday and played Sunday. So, I mean, it's not out of the question. Those guys, I think fans underestimate. During the week, there are 63 guys on the team, not 53. And then 53 are active and then 46 play on game day. But the 10 practice squad guys are there and in the same meeting rooms and the same position rooms. And way more than 10 guys run the scout team. Lots of guys who are backups and active special teams players run the scout team. So, you get everything there. So I actually think there's some peripheral benefit to Tyree making the practice squad, sitting there and absorbing and soaking everything in. That's if he gets there. If he gets there.
Yeah, no, and that has been my place all along. I didn't love Tyree Jackson in UB. I also have an issue with, I remember when Chad Kelly was coming out and everybody wanted the Bills to draft Chad Kelly. I thought Chad Kelly staying in Buffalo was probably the worst possible idea on the planet Earth. Not just because of his off the field issues, but because of the expectation that local fans would have for him, the clamoring for him that would go on. And it's just too much for a local kid. And I think there's some of that with Tyree where all preseason long, the diehard UB fans are going to say, this kid needs more of a shot. Why is Derek Anderson here? It's going to be just the constant conversation that Tyree doesn't need, the Bills don't really need. That aside, I think you hit it dead on. When I watch Tyree, I see the traits that you talk about, but I see a very vanilla offense that was still poorly run. Yeah. And I hear it a lot that people are saying
athletes around him too, exceptional athletes.
Yeah, totally great athletes. And I think if anything, he hurt some of those guys' draft stock.
I agree with that.
Which kind of stinks in itself. But a lot of people are saying, well, he's got similar traits to Josh Allen, and that's why he can come in and be a backup to Josh Allen. But and they're saying you don't have to change the offense for Tyree Jackson because of the physical traits. And I think that's maybe the furthest thing from the truth, that you don't have to change the offense, because I don't think Tyree Jackson could come in 2019 and run the Bills offense the way Josh Allen runs it, or even less athletically how Matt Barkley can put guys in position and run this offense. I think fans are maybe thinking it's a little bit too much plug and play. As long as you have a similar athletic person that they can just do it. I don't think Tyree Jackson's able to run an NFL offense in 2019. So yeah, give me your question now that we ranted about Tyree Jackson for a little. You said you had a question for us. Do you remember it?
Yes, I do. I remember it. You just think that I'm like I'm Adam Pac-Man Jones, like I'm smoking pot so much that I can't remember a question that I put up 6 minutes ago.
Well, I'm getting old enough where I'm starting to forget questions I thought about.
In fairness, that's accurate.
Yeah, 100p. So here's the thing, right? I forget who brought this up, and I really started to think about it, and I thought about, and it's a thing that I'm thinking
I
about.
apologize. I need to interrupt you guys. Derek Anderson just retired.
No way.
On the Bills' official Twitter right now, 1 minute ago, Derek Anderson has announced his retirement.
Well, there goes Tyree Jackson making the 53.
Apparently, the comments that you made a few moments ago, Nate, have slightly more relevance. Derek Anderson just announced his retirement.
Man, Tyree Jackson is having a good evening tonight.
That's a good day. He's having a good day.
That's a shot of Henny right there.
I still am going to say I still hope they sneak him on the practice squad, and that's a 2-quarterback active roster, and that we get to use that as an extra running back or wide receiver. But I'm okay if it's Tyree.
Yeah.
2 things on this before you give your comments. One, I don't think that he's retiring to become a coach. I think that would be crazy of him to take that type of pay cut. Yeah, exactly.
No,
he's going to go retire, and he's going to go back to playing golf and have nothing to do with football, because he's not going to take $700,000 pay cut to come back and work twice as hard. That's just not how the world works. Nothing that I said about Tyree Jackson changes.
All right, now time for the question.
That right there, like our last 2.5 minutes is probably a good promo. By the way, we should add a promo into this into the video. Anyways, so my question for you guys was, if you had a look right now at all the rosters of all the rookie quarterbacks, which do you guys believe not the rookie quarterbacks, second-year quarterbacks, Josh Allen's class, the first year or the first-round picks of last year, Lamar Jackson, Josh Rosen, Darnold, Baker, and Josh Allen. And I want to exclude Baker Mayfield in the Browns, because I think that's an extemporaneous situation. That's something that I just want to get out of the way. Out of every other rookie quarterback that's not Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns is what they're doing, which is surrounded by the best situation to succeed, to win, to take the next step in their second year. And my thought, and a lot of people's thought, is the New York Jets, because they got Le'Veon Bell. They added parts on that defense. They drafted Quinnen Williams, like that. Plus they, re-signed Quincy Enunwa. They got Robbie Anderson, who, yells weird things at cops. So I just look at the Jets, but they also traded for, and I'm sorry, what was the guy's name from the Oakland Raiders they traded for? Osemele?
Osemele, I think is how you say it.
The Raiders traded him to the Jets. And the first thing the Jets thought were like, yeah, we got a good deal here. That should scare you. If you think that you traded with John Gruden and he gave you a player, that should worry you that there's something really wrong with that player. Not that, I just am saying that they didn't do anything to add to that offensive line. And basically, you look at what Lamar Jackson has. They have a bunch of rookie wide receivers, second-year tight ends, and a rookie running back potentially. So, what are they doing? Well, no, they have Mark Ingram, I guess. But here's my thing. I think Josh Allen has the best supporting cast, both offensively and defensively. The other 21 guys around him.
You want to take the first shot, Aaron?
Outside of Baker Mayfield.
I think, I will take first. I don't think you're wrong. I think more importantly, I think the Bills have done every single thing possible to put Josh Allen in a place to succeed, and the entire team and organization and building is working towards that same goal.
And they're all behind him.
Every single person in the building is behind him. Greg brought it up on the last episode. There is no backup quarterback
controversy
coming for his job. There is nobody hoping that he doesn't succeed. Even though it sounds crazy that happens in professional football, it does. And I think from the guys running the cafeteria to the trainers to the people sweeping, everyone at One Bills Drive has the same mission of pushing Josh Allen forward to succeed. And I think it reflects in the 53-man roster and what they've done in the offseason. So I do think you're right. I think he has been given, and they went from maybe the worst possible roster to average. They didn't go from the worst roster to a top 10 roster or anything like that, but he's been given more tools than he had up to the point of it's an acceptable NFL roster.
Right. I mean, but they did something that went from, they literally went from worst to right smack dab in the middle and arguably a top 5 team in terms of depth. There aren't a ton of other teams, in my opinion, that roll and here's for the first time in a long time, and I think this will be a very big indicator for you guys. And then Greg, I'll let you tag on this, is how many guys get signed when the Bills make their cut during training camp. And typically it is 1 or 2 guys. There's going to be a handful of football players. I would be, and this might be a good Seagram's bet for the Rock Rile report. I might have to talk to him about this, that up to, I think, maybe 10 players could potentially get picked up just based on the depth that they've added at positions, that I think it could be double digits that get picked up on other teams. They've got that much depth outside of they've got, it's just a cornerback, for God's sakes. They've got starting players all over the team. So that's my thought on that.
Yeah, I'll add to that in a moment. I think, one, Rosen is an immediate throwaway. He's changing systems and going from the worst team in the league in 2018 to the worst team in the league in 2019. I respect what the Ravens are doing. They're always well run. They added a lot of speed around Lamar Jackson. I think he's in the discussion, but I think they still have a lot of holes. They had no receivers. Literally, Willie Snead was their top receiver prior to the draft, and then they did. Yeah, they selected a couple who are promising, but that they're literally depending on rookie receivers to lead the way. That hasn't worked out well for a lot of teams. The Jets invested a ton of money in running back, inside linebacker, and slot receiver for market-setting contracts for 3 talented receivers at positions that you're not supposed to set market-setting contracts at, and didn't invest in their offensive line barely at all. So I think that they're talented. I think there's a reason that they're projected to a similar roster than the Bills. I think it's a little flawed and more fantasy football driven than actual on the field. I also think they have a significant negative in the coaching standpoint. I think Adam Gase is a poor coach. I think him and Greg Williams is going to be awesome for 3 games and a disastrous, hilarious dumpster fire for 13 games.
They remind me, Greg, dude, I just want to tell you this because I think you'll appreciate this, is they remind me of the 2015 Buffalo Bills.
Yes, no, honestly, super similar. It's going to be fantastic comedy of personalities back and forth, and I can't see that. I think your point on the Bills' depth versus high-end talent is the real key, because they didn't add any superstar all-pro offensive linemen, but they added 7 professional NFL caliber offensive linemen. Plus we had one in Dawkins. They didn't add a bunch of superstars at receiver, but we added multiple NFL caliber ones. We added multiple tight ends. We added multiple defensive backs. We now have 5 NFL caliber cornerbacks. That kind of depth where, whatever scenario you want to use, it's not great to have Levi Wallace is your starting cornerback, or EJ Gaines, or Kevin Johnson, or Taron Johnson. But when you have the 4 of them to play 2 positions, that's pretty good. So that kind of scenario where we can afford 2 injuries on the offensive line and probably not have a huge drop off. Like if Spencer Long starts and then John Feliciano or Wyatt Teller has to come in instead, is that even a drop off? If Ty Nsekhe starts and then Cody Ford has to come in, is that a drop off? It's just having that short of Mitch Morris. Please, God, don't get hurt, Mitch Morris.
Right.
Other than that, we're in pretty good shape. I like Tyler Kroft, but if we have to play Jason Kroom or Dawson Knox more, is that a huge drop off? It's just, that is something we've never had. The same thing, LaShawn McCoy, Frank Gore, TJ Yeldon, Devin Singletary. We haven't had that problem in a long time where I'm not all that concerned about it. And to your point, I think the cut down day to the 53-man roster is going to be a disaster on Bills Mafia Twitter, because everyone is going to have their guy who gets cut and they're going to be furious about, and it's going to be 13 different guys that people are mad about.
Yep.
It's going to be great.
Yeah, I am super excited about that. And we've been talking about that in the Slack channel.
I can see, you know what's happening right now is AQ is out planning a bunch of preliminary this doesn't change anything about Tyree Jackson tweets. That's what's happening right now after Derek. He is extinguishing so many fires right now.
That is so on brand.
Tell me it's not. Tell me it's
literally.
I did put out a tweet. You can see live at Aaron Quinn 716. You can see that there. No, I'm texting with my wife, dealing with my 3-year-old at the same time. I am very excited about that depth, though. That's something that we talk about a lot in the Cover One Slack channel, that good players are going to be off this roster when it comes time to make these cuts. And I think I did a really way too early 53-man prediction, and it created some conversation for us, because I think for the first time, maybe in my adult life, there is some serious conversations to be had at the bottom of the roster for the Buffalo Bills and guys that are going to get cut for real. I think usually we can assume
people were pissed about Rod Streeter. There's going to be much better talent.
Much better than yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So speaking of this, though, because there's still roster spots, they are still looking to add talent. We missed on Ziggy Ansah, obviously the Brandon Beane interview talking about Ian Rappaport being trash. That got a huge burn yesterday. Seattle does end up signing Ziggy Ansah. Bills were very much in on that. They have Lee Smith coming in. There's free agents out there that they're still trying to bring in and add talent to this depth on this team. I know, Greg, you have some targets that you would like in this, what I call, we're into the 4th wave of free agency. I know the 3rd wave exists. I think we are now officially into this 4th possible wave of free agency. Who are some guys that you would be looking to add, and what positions and why?
So there's a handful of areas that I think we still have somewhat of a need. Anybody who follows me on Twitter knows I was all over Ziggy Ansah, showing that he wasn't as injury prone as people were saying. I think he had played 14, 16, 13, and 14 games before last year, and actually had significantly more production than people wanted to give credit for. I thought he was going to make a big impact when he was healthy. Then Brandon Beane comes out yesterday and makes the statements that he did on the Tim Graham show, and I really thought we were all in and that we were going to be signing him. So last night when that broke with Seattle, I can't lie, I shed a little bit of a tear. It did hurt my soul a little bit.
And then you saw the numbers.
And then I found out they gave him $9 million with a max of $13.5 million, and I felt a lot better about Brandon Beane sticking to his guns. But either way, that spot, I think there's still a need. So right now you're talking about rock solid, 3 of Jerry Hughes, Trent Murphy, Shaq Lawson. Shaq is a rundowns guy. Trent Murphy has flashes when he's healthy. I'm hoping that coming off the not having an offseason of ACL rehab will work. I still have full faith in Jerry, but he is going to be 32 during the season. I would love to have better than Eli Harold and Eddie Yarborough as that 4th defensive end. I don't know that there's anyone out there that jumps ahead of Shaq or Trent Murphy, but I think that a Shane Ray or a Derek Morgan are on par with those guys and could be a legitimate 4th guy playing 30 to 40% of snaps, coming in as a rotational guy, and would be an upgrade over Harold or Yarborough. There's a couple other names out there. I don't think Muhammad Wilkerson's a great fit. No. I don't think Jamie Collins is a pass rusher. I think he's more of a 3-4 outside linebacker. There's some other names some fans have thrown out there, but my 2 would be Shane Ray and Derek Morgan. They're at defensive end. I don't think we need anyone at defensive tackle any longer. Obviously, Ed Oliver falling in your lap is as good as it gets. The same thing, putting an investment into Voshon Joseph and bringing in guys. I know everybody loves the name Foggy. So, we brought in multiple undrafted free agents on the market there. So being able to have a couple guys, that defensive end is where I see the most investment needed.
Can I cut you off on that one real quick? Would you still pursue a trade for Gerald McCoy if he's on the trade market, even though we don't have the need? Would you still upgrade there?
So
is he playing your one technique?
I think he can do both.
I think he can do it.
So the hard part is we cannot get out of Star Lotulelei. I like Star Lotulelei more than the average fan. I think he plays his role well. I think he's going to be a perfect complement to Ed Oliver. Regardless, he is on this roster. Jordan Phillips can be cut. We just gave him $4.5 million. I think only about 500, maybe $1 million, off to look, was guaranteed. He is not necessarily a roster lock. That would be weird. Ed Oliver and Harrison Phillips are roster locks. they would cost us money to cut them. That's not going to happen in their draft picks. So a fifth defensive tackle under any circumstance is weird and awkward. We have not had 5 active defensive tackles on the roster. I like Gerald McCoy a lot, but I don't know how that would work literally unless we're trading Harrison Phillips for him, I guess, as the compensation. I don't see that as a scenario that could work out, but I like Gerald McCoy. I would want that. I'd much rather find a way to get so Tampa Bay is in a terrible shape. They literally can't sign their draft picks right now because they don't have the cap room. I would take defensive end William Golston for them for free. I'd give them a 2021 conditional 7th round pick. He's $3.8 million. That's actually almost exactly the amount they need. I think he would compete with Eddie Yarborough and Eli Harrell. I think he's more realistic to acquire for nothing and would be more palatable for Tampa Bay. I like Gerald McCoy a lot. I wanted him a ton when I wanted to go the Montez Sweat, Brian Burns, Chase Winovich route defensive end in the draft. We didn't draft a defensive end there, so I want that now that we have Ed Oliver.
That's fair. Would you do it, Nate?
I don't think so. I just don't. It would just be getting a little gluttonous. And I guess the question becomes, can he play the one technique position? I don't know. I liked a couple of Greg's points. I like the Shane Ray idea. I think he brings the one guy that can come in on third down and be a player for you and have a role. And that's the Belichick way is players that fill roles, not necessarily positions. But what kind of role can you provide? And I think Shane Ray has one of those and as a third down pass rusher. Derek Morgan, right? I mean, maybe he could beat Eddie Yarborough out. If he doesn't, he just makes Eddie Yarborough better by him being on the roster, I would think. But defensive end is right there. The only other position I could really see them doing anything with is potentially tight end. Kyle Rudolph is still out there, potentially available. He's a player I could see them going after. I would be open to Kyle Rudolph.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be more than open to Kyle Rudolph. I think
that was one other name I didn't reference on Tampa Bay that would help them get out from under the cap issue is Cameron Brate. They paid him a ton of money last year, also invested in O.J. Howard. He's someone, if we could get, I'm talking about, you get somebody 25 cents on the dollar, I would take Cameron Brate off their hands to help alleviate their cap solution. But Kyle Rudolph would be NFL Man of the Year, multiple time captain, Pro Bowler. He checks.
He's a process,
every process box for me.
Yeah. I mean, OJ Howard checks all the boxes for me, and if we could steal him somehow, I'm all about that.
I'll give him Harrison.
All your man boxes,
I'll give him Harrison Phillips and a future draft pick for OJ Howard and Gerald McCoy.
Oh,
Madden trade done.
Yeah, let's do it.
You got to turn trade rejections off. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah, no, I will go against the grain here a little bit with you guys. I really want nothing to do with Shane Ray. I don't know that he's good at football. I'm not sure.
Smokes pot, dude? Is that why? Is it because he's formerly a pot smoker?
No, I love former pot smokers. I think there's a ton of them that I like, and I've been for signing. No, I just don't really think that. I think he was way overdrafted, and I don't know that he has what it takes to be a good NFL player. I do like your point, and it makes me think about it a little bit differently. Of Belichick has really had great success in taking some of those guys that were that way in other places and putting them in a position to win. I don't know that we're there yet. I think we have a good structure in Buffalo to allow those types of guys to come into a good structure with good leadership and all those things. And I think maybe eventually we'll be there. I just don't know that we're there, and I don't love taking that risk with Shane Ray, and then maybe getting rid of a guy like Eddie Yarborough, who maybe isn't as skilled, but he's going to show up and do his job and do it 110% every single time. And I think McDermott likes that idea that maybe a guy is a little less talented, but he's going to do exactly what he's supposed to every single time. I want to get into this one. We posted this on Cover One social media accounts. So if you're not following us over on Cover One, definitely do it. We have some fun stuff. And obviously Eric does a lot of his breakdowns on the social media accounts. So you definitely want to get over there and make sure you follow us on every social media platform that you can here. I'm going to put it up here on our shared screen. This was a post that we did this week. Can everybody see that now?
Got it.
It was combinations of the offensive line. And I think that this is a really fun conversation. It got a lot of traction on our social media. This isn't the only combinations that the Bills can go into this season with, which says enough in itself, but I thought these were some fun ones. So we have, I'm going to start with you, Nate, because Greg and I have talked about this quite a bit. I'm going to start with you. We have A, for the people that are listening to this and not watching it. For the first combination, we have Deion Dawkins, sorry, go ahead. Oh, we have Deion Dawkins, Quinn Spain, Mitch Morse, Feliciano, and Nsekhe. For the second combination, we have Nsekhe, Dawkins at guard, Morris at center, Long, and then Ford over at right tackle. Combination C, we have Deion Dawkins at left tackle, Quentin Spain at left guard, Mitch Morris at center, Ford at right guard. Nate's getting really up on this one here, and then Nsekhe over at right tackle. And then for the D option, we had to throw Wyatt Teller in here at some point. We have Nsekhe, Dawkins, Morse, Teller, and Ford. I think I already know where you're heading, Nate. Take a look. Tell us. Nate's a C guy.
Dawkins, Spain, Morse, Ford, Nsekhe, whatever you want to call them. That needs to be the line right there. I'll go to bat for that line all day. I just think it requires the least amount of movement out of guys that are out of their natural position. I think that left side is really good, and I really like that right side a lot. A lot of athleticism, a lot of size on that right side, and you got a 6'5" quarterback who could definitely use a right tackle with a little bit more athleticism. And not only that, but Deion Dawkins that's got a guy next to him that he can count on, play in and play out. And to be quite honest with you, Spain and Morse together are both two guys that are big time communicators. If you go watch basically any game that Quentin Spain is, he's always the guard that typically handles the cadence. So what he does is, and you'll see this in a lot of offenses now, so that the center doesn't have to actually look underneath his legs to be able to tell the signal that the quarterback is giving on a silent count. So a lot of times it's the guard. Anytime you watch a game, Quentin Spain's always the guard that's handling the snap count with the silent count with the center. So him and Morse together to me make a ton of sense. And not only that, I just like that combination of five. I think it's really maximizing the top end talent you have at the offensive line position.
Hey, Nate, the question that I struggled with is, what do you think the discussion is between Bean, McDermott, and Bobby Johnson? What if they decide that, hey, Cody Ford's best long-term value to us and the best impact to the team long-term is Cody Ford at right tackle, and that we think the winner of the competition of John Feliciano, Spencer Long, Wyatt Teller, Russell Bodine, Vlad Dukas, even though they're going to get cut, that the combination of the winner of that competition is 98% of what Ford would be as a rookie, maybe not long-term at right guard, but as a rookie in 2019, and that we're better off having him learn, mentor, work on his refinement. I know Eric's had some questions on how heavy his feet are, his movement. Do you think there's a scenario where they'd rather have him focused there and still have almost as good of a line in 19? Or do you think no matter what, no excuses, best five guys on the field no matter what, and if we have to move them again in the future, just we'll deal with it then?
I do really think it's the latter, because it's something that Brandon Beane has mentioned is the best five. That's something you hear a lot from him when he talks about the offensive line. And I do really think that is the scenario. I think that they owe it to their second-year quarterback to play the best five, regardless of the long-term ramifications potentially, because they realized this year that you can get quality players in free agency and be able to move in and move out guys. And, they could spend a top pick next year on another offensive lineman. And, I mean, right now they've got a couple of second-round picks on their offensive line now, and Cody Ford and Deion Dawkins, and a guy who a lot of people like in the league. And the Bills were praised for the Ty Nsekhe pickup in the offseason. Like, a lot of people praised the Bills for that pickup because he's versatile, can play guard and tackle. And I think, and I read a piece, maybe it was Buffalo Rumblings, but I read a piece about him and basically talking like, good luck keeping him off the field. I think he's going to be one of your best five, and good luck trying to keep him off the field,
I feel the same. There's a piece of me that from a long-term roster construction standpoint and some of the film questions, there's a piece of me that wants him to have almost a redshirt year. But I agree that just watching some of the highlights of him just throwing guys out of the club and literally throwing other grown men around like rag dolls, I think it's going to be really hard to keep him off the field. So I think C is our most likely scenario, but I'm curious to see what if Ford is so good early on that it does push that over. I think that there's a scenario where it does cause some shuffling that could be interesting.
The thing I like about C real quick is just the athleticism and the size. The size of C is the biggest offensive line you can put out there, but it might also be the most athletic. And one of the things that I don't love about, I like Spencer Long as sort of a rotational player, but what he would just look out of place in the B scenario. And really just being I like the fact that in C that you're getting your biggest, meanest, and potentially most athletic offensive lineman out of the field at one time. And I think that benefits the style of quarterback that Josh Allen is. And I think it also fits something that I think Brian Dable really wants to include in his offense next year, that his offensive line really held back, and that was the screen game. And it's one of the things I know we all talked about a lot is why can they not game plan more effective screen passes to get Josh Allen into a rhythm earlier in football games? If this team was a halfway competent screen team last year, Josh Allen's completion percentage probably could have been up 4 or 5 points. Like, that's the difference you see in a lot of these quarterbacks in their completion percentage. Kirk Cousins doesn't throw the ball that far from the line of scrimmage. His completion percentage is always great, but he's always throwing within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. We know that Josh Allen's going to stretch the field, but why not give him some supplemental screen passes? You've got some running backs now that can help you in the pass game, i.e., I think maybe most importantly, TJ Yeldon. So this, I think C gives them the best opportunity to let these offensive linemen get downfield and become blockers and athletic players. And Cody Ford sure showed that on film.
Well, here's my problem is a couple things here. I think in the years that we've had Brandon Beane here, I've really looked at all the things that he said and lined it up with what has happened. And I don't think that he is a guy that's trying to manipulate in the media anything. I think he's pretty honest when he's asked questions and he gives it how it is. And he's been pretty adamant about putting Ford at tackle, at least the start. And I think that is where they see him. And I do have a little bit of, I understand the, get out your 5 best now. And that he's also said that. But I don't know that Ford immediately is one of the 5 best. I think potentially he is, and on paper he is. I don't know that if that'll translate into the field in 2019. And I do worry, to Greg's point, about the long-term implications of putting a guy at that position. I don't know that you then in the future move him, or now you're drafting another tackle next year. That's the same conversation with Deion Dawkins. It's too early, I think, even though it's a conversation we've had in the Slack channel and stuff. I still think it's too early in his career to make the move to guard. I think you give him another year here and to really see if he can solidify the left tackle position. But on this one particular combo pick, I agree with you guys that C looks the most powerful, looks the best. If I can make one change, I would look at A, and I don't love Feliciano, but if I could stick Long in where Feliciano is with A, I think that is something that I like enough to roll into the 2019 season. And the reason that I like Long over Ford, again, is veterans. I like the idea of having all across the line guys that are veterans that have played in the NFL, that can communicate at an NFL level, have played with each other. And there's something comforting to me about that with Josh Allen going into the second year. Because again, back to the point, every single thing on this team is about Josh Allen's success in 2019.
The one I would add, if I was to add a new E or to adjust one of these, I think there's an argument to be made that the long-term value of B, if you took Nsekhe at left tackle where he's played the best, Cody Ford at right tackle where they talk about him, Morse at center, I agree with you and don't want to move Dawkins, but I know that there were a lot of discussions, just like Nate said about Ford coming out, that, hey, maybe he's a good tackle, but what if he's an all-pro guard? There were people who were saying that about Dawkins in the draft. And then Quentin Spain, if he can play right guard. I think you could put out a line of Nsekhe at left tackle, Dawkins at left guard, Morris at center, Quentin Spain at right guard, Cody Ford at right tackle. That would be a lot of change, a lot of people out of position, but if you pick them out early and let them gel together, there's a possibility that could be the long-term fit for where Dawkins has the highest ceiling, where Ford has the highest ceiling, even though it would be a lot of change to go through. So I still would pick C, but I also think there's a scenario where And Nate, that this is a point we made last week, that I think there's a point of diminishing returns in this competition of, hey, let the best 5 make it. You got to make that call pretty early, because you need to let those 5 gel, and that you can't be juggling your 12th different iteration in the 4th preseason game. You got to make this call. My gut is you need to have a pretty good stab at it in the 2nd preseason game and hope you're locking it in then with maybe one more shift. And then beyond there, it has to be locked in for anything going forward.
And to that point, Nate, I want to ask you, because it is something that we've talked about. I think a lot of people are excited about the offensive line. We're really excited about their improvements. Again, similar to the wide receiver room, they went from one of the worst 3 units in the entire league last year to at least an average, if not better, unit, no matter what combination it is that they put out there, right? There's going to be some growing pains. There's going to be some change, no matter who's moving or just new guys playing next to each other that have never played with each other before in a new system. There's going to be some gelling that needs to occur, like Greg said, and just growing pains in this scenario. How long do you expect that to take? And if it bleeds into the season of these growing pains, how long into the season would you expect that change? And should fans maybe pump the brakes on the excitement of this coming out and just being a gangbusters offensive line from week 1?
It could take some time, but I also think that they're good enough talent-wise across whoever they put out there to be a unit that can come out and play. You know, this isn't a team that listen, the competition up the middle last year was really depressing. I mean, it depressed me during training camp watching 2 players that I just really didn't think belonged as starters or really depth players in the NFL. And now you come in with a guy like Mitch Morse, who I think is just a pro's pro. I mean, he wasn't my first choice. I really wanted Matt Paradis a lot. The more I got to know Mitch Morse, the more I really liked the decision. I mean, he was also the center of the best offense and best passing offense in football. That means something to me. He helped a rookie quarterback, absolutely helped a rookie quarterback. Second-year quarterback, but basically a rookie quarterback, navigate one of the most incredible seasons that I've ever seen of an NFL quarterback. My QB1 coming out of that year as well. On cover 1, you can go see up there. And I just wanted to point that out, that I did have Patrick Mahomes as my QB1.
We can edit that part out of the podcast.
I wanted a nice silence for it.
Yeah, we'll make that a promo.
People ask me about that, but.
So we're going to get out of here because I know we're taking up everybody's time at this point. We're going to skip over to one here, final fun question. Kind of want to go around the horn here a little bit because I thought this was fun. Andy Carlson, the Andy Carlson Show. You can find him at Andy Carlson Show on Twitter. He is a fantastic follow just of NFL stuff. He's a Vikings guy, does a Vikings podcast. I always find his Twitter engaging, and he always is doing fun things. And today he posted it yesterday, but I saw it today. His tweet was, who was the Vikings player that you always stand for that never really panned out? And he put Jerick McKinnon. And I want to pose that question to you guys for Bills, long all time. We're all fans at the end of the day, no matter what we cover the team, we're fans. And so we stand for guys. And for those of you that don't know what standing is, it's just being kind of a homer, total pounding the table for this guy. No matter what, you love this player. Let's start with you, Greg. Who is your all-time Bills stan?
So there's a couple different scenarios. I think some of them are relatively easy to go into. I really talked myself into EJ Manuel and all of the off-field intangibles I thought were really going to translate. That was horribly, horribly wrong. I really liked Mike Williams, the tackle out of Texas. He was just a behemoth, huge guy that I thought was going to be a monster coming out. That one didn't turn out all that well either. So, there's a handful of guys like there. My weird one is Ashton Yeboah. I really always liked it. I thought he was such a phenomenal athlete. I always thought it was going to come in and translate, coming out of Ohio State. For some reason, and maybe it's just because, Yeboah is a fun name, but I always really thought he was going to translate and turn into something more, and just never really got the traction to get going there. So I think that, EJ would be kind of a close second, but my weird one is Ashton Yeboah.
Nate, where were you at? Who are you standing for? Who?
Sean Nelson.
Ooh, nice.
thought he was like the next tight end. Like I thought the Bills had gotten such a steal from him, and he just didn't really. Southern Miss just didn't really. It just didn't work. He wasn't very good. The other player too that I'll say, Roscoe Parrish was another one that I really. I was pounding a table for a long time. One of my favorite players. I also thought of a couple other unique ones. Who was another tight end? Robert Royal was another guy that I thought didn't really get
free
enough
agent
love.
signing.
Yeah, didn't really get enough love. He played in a tough era. Of that football team was just maybe the worst era of Bills football was the Robert Royal era. I mean, do you guys any other ones pop up for you?
For me, hands down, the top one for me is Trent Edwards. I was just running up and down the street that Trent Edwards was absolutely our franchise quarterback, that he was going to be the guy. And I really thought he was trending in that direction before the concussion. And then I pounded the table that the concussion ruined his career. And if it wasn't for that, he was going to be the franchise guy.
For you. What a convenient out.
I always find an out.
I guess I have a great one for you guys. Do you remember when the Bills got the undrafted free agent steal of the draft out of Ferris State, defensive tackle monster Justin Zimmer?
No.
Oh, I was
thought you were talking about. I thought you were talking about Drew Haddad from UB.
There you go. No, I actually remember convincing myself and other people that we really were onto something when we snagged Justin Zimmer because he was such a monster. And it turns out that he just looked good against Division III people.
Well, so there's some fun ones that I didn't necessarily stand for, but since Twitter has existed, you see other people standing for. And to that point, Mike Jasper was one.
Dude, I was just thinking that.
Everybody was like, this guy was jumping over tables.
It was the next Jason Peters. He was the next Jason Peters.
This is a really good one, and it's Mike Williams, the wide receiver, that everyone just thought was like the biggest steal, that he wasn't a giant piece of shit, but it turned out that he was. And like, I just remember that one long touchdown, like in week 2 that he had. I can't think of the game that he had that long touchdown. Maybe it was from EJ Manuel, but I just thought Mike Williams was going to be so good. He was so good in Tampa, got in trouble, and I thought the Bills were. It was un-Billsy to go get Mike Williams, and they did, and he just he flamed out. But Roscoe Parrish one hits close to home.
Tool timers, that has to be an all-time stand fest in Bills Mafia history. It was unbelievable.
No one. I mean, we did reference it earlier in the show, but Brandon Riley's up there. There are a lot of stands out there still for Riley.
Some Nick O'Leary stands. There are definitely some Nick O'Leary stands. So there's definitely the people have gotten behind some guys.
There are people who won't admit it who were fully Peterman stands.
Oh, there's people that have the receipts.
Yeah, no,
there's
receipts. A lot of deleted tweets.
Right. There are a lot of receipts out there for that. So think about that, guys, and get at us on who you think was your biggest all-time Bills stan. I'd love to hear him. It's a fun conversation because it brings up
more in the chat. Derrick Rogers.
Oh, Rob Quinn.
Yeah. Great. I think Kelvin and Maestro were talking about that in the chat. That's a great one.
Nobody in the history of anything has stand harder for anything than Rob Quinn stand for Derrick Rogers. He has got the receipts to prove it. Go search his Twitter handle of Derrick. It is a love fest. So we're going to have to let Rob know to listen to this. So if you follow Rob Quinn, go hit him. I hit him up every time draft season comes around. I'm like, who's your Derrick Rogers this year, man? Crazy. Fun stuff. So, Nate, you don't get on the show as much as I'd like to see it. It was fun to have you on tonight. As much as I like to give you crap, it's always good to have you on and talk Bills with you. You're a fantastic follow. I enjoy the way you engage with Twitter and myself. It's just a lot of fun to have you around. Where can people find you and get involved in that engagement?
At Nate Geary WGR, of course. If you don't know, you should get involved because a lot of people know now that if they want to be, like how people have weird fetishes, they like to be like whipped or whatever.
I have no idea what fetishes even mean.
Well, whatever. Some people like whatever. Some people like to say things to me because they know that they'll get a response. Just so that I, drop an F-bomb on them or something and then they get off on that. So if you're that person, welcome. I welcome you. I usually won't block you unless, I don't know. I don't really have a guy. They only block you if you get weird, you know.
Yeah, if it gets
like
personal or weird, yeah,
you might try to fight me. Then I have to block you because that's what my boss said. Is that I'm not allowed to fight. I have to block.
Yeah, it's a good policy to have on the Twitter. Do you have any content coming up that anybody should expect?
So I've begun to archive all of Josh Allen's games last year to find, and I'm going to do leading into training camp a game by game, the 11 or 12 games that he played in, game by game recap going back to last year and doing quarterly, first, second, third, fourth quarter breakdowns of Josh Allen to kind of relive the 2018 season through the lens of reevaluating Josh Allen going into training camp. So that series is going to start here in the next couple weeks. I'm going to kind of drop one or two per week heading into training camp. So that's in the works. It's already started. I just got to start the writing portion, but all the film was archived. So.
That had to have been a roller coaster of emotions for you.
It was, well, especially because I know I went into the season thinking one thing, I ended the season thinking another. Yeah. So it was interesting, kind of flipping it on its head, knowing what I know and thinking what I know now, going back to week one, and going back to that Green Bay game.
Yeah, not fun. Yeah. So
yeah, up at cover1.net and Nate Geary WGR. That's where you find me trolling mostly you.
Yeah, I love it. Greg,
I can confirm.
So Nate's trolling me. I'm sitting there trolling you. And where can the people see that?
Come and find me at Greg Tomsett, GregTompsett, having a good time most of the time. Kind of go in on some people here and there, and maybe I get a little overzealous, but I get bored sometimes, and I like to stretch the legs and take it out on people, and it happens.
Yeah, and I feel like you maybe had your own name written out so that you could spell it for everybody without messing it up.
In cursive.
It's practice.
I'm
working on it with my kids.
Yeah, you guys can find me at Aaron Quinn 716, kind of mostly messing with these two on Twitter, but really engaging with anybody that's willing to have a talk, and hopefully you have a little bit of a backbone and come in and give it to me, and I can give it right back to you, because that's really the fun of Twitter and sports, is engaging in these conversations and having those talks. But most importantly, go follow Cover One on Twitter at cover_1_, and really on all your social medias, just search Cover One. You guys are all smart people. You know how to work social media. Go find it. It's really, we have a ton of great content out there. Eric is always posting different clips, mashups, different things that he's finding. He is an investigator of film. So he goes in not looking for anything. He'll go in and find something that he wasn't even looking for, and he ends up writing a 1,600 word synopsis of what happened. And so he puts all those videos out on social media. You're not going to want to miss it. Head over to Cover One, find us on social media, head over to cover1.net. Consume all of our content. While you're over there, check out the premium subscription. Right now, $10 gets you premium access for the entire year. It's a really great deal. You pay once, you're in for the entire year. You get access to the premium Slack channel, the premium film room. And Eric did something a couple weeks ago that was like really super cool. He got on Zoom with a few of the guys and watched film with some of our premium members and kind of showed them how he watches film, took them through the process, answered any questions. It was an invaluable thing, and you get that as part of the $10. So definitely join us, do all that, and make sure while you're here on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the little notification bell. That'll let you know when we're going live. That's really what's important here. And make sure that you join us. We're here. Obviously, we're here on Thursday night tonight, but we're usually here Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So make sure you join us. And we really appreciate you guys being in the chat and being active, because the show doesn't happen without listeners. So we really appreciate you guys coming on tonight, and we'll catch you on the next one.